lämpimästi tervetulleeksi tänne 1001 tarina-iltaan. Te olette minun unelmieni täyttymys. Mä oon todella iloinen, että tämä Celebrating Life-festivaali voi saada huipentumansa täällä ja että meidän kansainväliset vieraat niin voivat tulla kertomaan teille tarinoita. Te olette nyt osallisena tämmöisen kansainvälisen tarinankerronta renesanssin alussa myös täällä Suomessa. Ja sitä osa kulttuuripääkaupunki-ohjelmaa, joten tänä vuonna me juhlistetaan elämää ja ensi vuonna me juhlistetaan transformaatiota. No, tämä kaikki ei olisi millään mahdollista, jollei täällä olisi todella loistavia ja hirveän ahkeria festivaalityöntekijöitä. Mä haluan erityisesti kiittää Siina Siltasta, joka nyt on Kotiteatterin puolesta ollut järjestämässä tätä, Leena Lombakkaa, joka on Sydkustens Landskapsförbundin puolesta, Venlahatakkaa, joka on itsensä puolesta, Valtteri Virtasta, Liisa Nylundia, Noora. Joo. Eli tässä on paljon ihmisiä takana ja tämä on tosi kivaa, että me ollaan täällä juuri tänään. Tervetuloa kaikki.
This story comes from Scotland, from the same part of Scotland as this story. There was a beach, and on the beach a little house, and in the house there lived a mother, a father, and a little girl. She was Margaret, and the thing that she loved to do more than anything else, even from when she was really small, was to spend time on the beach on her own, and she liked to collect shells. She'd bring all the shells back to the house and then put them round the edge of the house, all round the gardens and round the steps, round the doorway. And the people in the village just over the hill, they started to call that house Shell House. Shell House, where little Margaret lives. So Margaret grew, and as time passed, eventually both her parents died, and Margaret was living now in the house on her own. Now she had a friend. She'd been at school with him. His name was Alistair. He lived in the village, and his mother ran the shop. And when he grew up, he ran the shop with his mum. But there was one problem with Alistair, and that was that he liked money a little bit too much. He was more interested in money than in people. He would do anything he could to get a little bit more out of people, even the old people. Now, one day, some people came from the big house on the top of the hill. They came into the shop and they said to Alistair, "We're having a great party. It's somebody's birthday and we're going to make a big cake. We need eggs." Now, Alistair, he got all his eggs from Margaret. She kept hens and chickens around the back of the house at Shell House. And he looked and he saw that the eggs were finished. And he said, "I'll get eggs. I'll bring them up to the big house." So he ran out of the door. He had no time even to put a coat on. He wanted to get down and get the eggs and get them up there and get the money for the eggs. He made his way down to Shell House. But a funny thing he saw as he got closer, it was starting to get dark, and as he came near to Shell House, he saw that all the windows in Shell House were lit. And he thought, that's funny. Margaret lives on her own. Why would she have all the windows lit? When he came to the front of the house, he looked through the kitchen window and he saw a strange sight. Inside the kitchen, sitting on chairs all around the walls, were very strange people. And they all had the same long black coat. And they all had the same round brown eyes. And Alistair thought to himself, who are those people? I've never seen people like that before. And he knocked at the door. Now Margaret didn't open the door and let him in. She opened the door, she stepped outside and she closed the door behind. She said, "Oh, Alistair. Hello. What do you want?" He said, "Margaret, who are those people? Who are those people in your house? Who are they?" She said, "They're friends of mine. What do you want?" He said, "Well, I've come for some eggs. I'll get you some eggs." But she's noticed it was cold outside. She couldn't really leave him just outside the door. So she said, "Look, if I let you in, you must promise never to tell anybody about these people." He said, "Tell other people what?" She said, "Well, Alistair, these are silkies. These are seal people." "Silkies," he said. "There's no such thing as silk." She said, "These are silkies, and you must never tell anybody about them." He didn't know what to do, but he was cold. She opened the door, she went to get the eggs, and he stepped inside. Now, when he stepped inside and closed the door, all of those people in the room, they started to look at him, and none of them said anything at all. And then one of them stood up and he said, "If you are a friend of Margaret, then have my chair." So Alistair went over and he sat down, and they were all looking at him. That is long black coat, big round eyes. And he sat there and he waited. And then Margaret came in, and she had a basket of eggs, and he went over to pick them up, and he was just about to go out of the door, but the man that had given him his chair said, "Alistair, you've got no coat, and it's cold. Here, take mine." And he took off his coat. "Take mine, I have another." And he put it on Alistair, and he said, "Look after that coat. That coat will bring you good luck. Margaret's got one too." So Alistair had this strange long black coat on and the basket of eggs. And he walked away from Shell House, and he walked all the way back up to the village. But as he walked, something started to happen to him. He started to feel warm inside, and he started to feel light in his heart. And by the time he got back to the village, he was singing a little song to himself. Now, as soon as he walked into the shop, his mother looked up and knew something had happened.
My favourite stories that celebrates Scotland's links with her northern neighbours. Long, long ago, in the far, far north, there lived a farmer. And he had 4 sons. And 3 of them were fine, big, strapping lads, and they worked hard. And his 4th son, well, he was called Ashipattle because he liked nothing better than to sit close to the fire, stirring up the ashes, watching the flames, and dreaming. His clothes were often just covered with ashes and burn marks and such. Even his mother despaired of him. But Ashipattle was a dreamer. And while the 3 sons worked during the day very, very hard, even they, at night, liked nothing better than to sit beside that fire and hear the fantastic stories that Ashipattle could come up with. None of them to be believed, of course. Now, it just so happened, at that time, in the world, there lived the most monstrous creature you could possibly imagine. And it went by the name of the Muckle Mester Stoorworm. And the Muckle Mester Stoorworm was a sea dragon. And it was so huge that its body coiled twice around the world. And while it was a sea dragon, it wasn't just satisfied with what it could eat from in the sea or on the sea. For from time to time, when the Mucklemester Stoorworm came close to land, and it opened its great jaws, snake out its forked tongue, and take anything in its path. Whole forests, herds of cattle, flocks of sheep, schoolyards full of children, houses. It just went. And so, of course, people lived in fear, lest the Mucklemester Stoorworm should ever come to rest near their shores. And of course, it happened in that land one day. People woke up and they thought, what's this out to sea? A great island? But no, it wasn't. It was merely the head of the Mucklemester Stoorworm bobbing there on the sea. And of course it came to pass that the Mucklemester Stoorworm grew very, very hungry. He ate twice a day. First of all, when the sun's rays stroked his eyelids, he would open his great jaws, and he would suck in the sea and everything in the sea and everything on the sea, and slowly digest it. And then when it had been digested, he would rid himself of the water. He would open his mouth again and spew it all back out. Yeah. Now, if you were standing on a beach, even the little children knew this. You see, what would happen is the water would rush down the beach. And after a period of time, the water would come back up the beach. You had to be very careful. If you ever saw that, you knew the Mucklemester Stoorworm was somewhere about. Now, the Mucklemester Stoorworm, of course, started to ravage the land. And the farmers, they went to the king and said, we have to find a way to rid the land of this creature. Our homes are destroyed, our crops are destroyed, our flocks of sheep and herds of cattle are disappearing. What can be done? And so the king thought, not very long, I shall call the 3 wise men and see if they can come up with an answer. And they thought for 3 days and 3 nights, and they came up with an answer. Take 7 young girls, bind them hand and foot, and lay them out on the rocks on a Saturday morning, and that should satisfy the Mucklemester Stoorworm. And believe it or not, that's exactly what they did. Saturday morning, 7 young girls laid out on the rocks, ready for the Mucklemester Stoorworm. And fair enough, it did satisfy them. No more sheep, no more cattle, no more forest stock down for a whole week. 7 more girls on the next Saturday morning, taken down, bound hand and foot, laid out on the rocks. Well, of course, this couldn't possibly go on. And the people, weeping, wondering what on earth they could do, went back to the king. This is no solution, they said. So the king sent for the wisest man of all. And he came. And he thought for 3 long days and 3 long nights. And when he went to the king, he was as white as a sheet and trembling. Well, what is the answer? There must be a solution, said the king. Oh, sire, there is, but I'm afraid. Sire, what you have to do is you have to give to the Mucklemester Stoorworm the most beautiful girl in the land. Now the king went white as a sheet, but of course the most beautiful girl in the land was his daughter, and she went by the unlikely name of Jenny Lovely. And he said, that can't possibly happen. I can't possibly give up my daughter. But she stepped forward and she said, I am the daughter of a Viking. You have the sword of Odin. Do you think I'm not brave enough to face the Mucklemester Stoorworm? I will be on those rocks on Saturday morning, and you will not need to bind my feet or my hands. Well, there were several days before Saturday, so the king sent messengers across the land, hoping that some brave knight, or even an army, might come along and do in for the Mucklemester Stoorworm. And they came. 36 of them, I seem to recall. And the first 12 went down to the beach, just simply saw the Mucklemester Stoorworm's head and hightailed it out of there. The next 12 came and peered. They actually were brave enough to wait till it started to open its jaws. They turned tail and ran. And the other 12 never even got down to the beach. They spent all their time in the long hut drinking beer. So finally, the king decided that the only thing that could be done would be for him to set his great long ship ready, to have the sword Snickersnapper taken out of its very special hiding place, and he would wear that sword, and he himself would go and fight the Mucklemester Stillworm. But one of those messengers had been a little tardy, and was still out there spreading word that a brave knight was needed. And he happened to come to the farm of Ashipattle. And he told them what was going on, and how nobody could fight the Mucklemester Stillworm, and how the king himself was going out on that Saturday morning in the hopes that he would save his daughter's life. But of course, had there been a brave person, that brave person would have been able to marry Gender Lovely and half the kingdom as well. Well, the farmer and his 3 sons took that news on board, but Ashipattle, he said, well, I shall kill the Mucklemester Stillworm and I shall marry Gender Lovely. Well, the lads just turned, oh, get on with you. You're just a dreamer. You're good for nothing. Go and sit beside that fire there. In fact, stoke it up. It's getting a wee bit chilly and it's time for our tea. And so Ashipattle did as he was told he usually did. He sat beside the fire there and got it all stoked up, and they had their dinner. And they talked about the monstrous battle that was to take place. And the farmer's wife said, I'd like to go along the beach there and watch this battle in the morning. And the sons said, well, we would too. But the father said, no, I have no heart for that, and there's far too much work to be done on the farm. One by one, those that had been working went off to their beds, and Ashipattle, who hadn't been doing any work at all day, sat beside the fire. Now, the minute he knew that everybody was asleep, he took his mother's iron cooking pot. He took the tongs and stirred up the fire until way, way, way down in the fire he found himself a large piece of glowing peat. This he put in the bottom of the iron pot, opened the door quietly, and then he ran. He ran and he ran and he ran, because he had a long way to go, until he reached the sand dunes above the beach. And there, sure enough, outlined against the dark sky, was the dark mountainous head of the Mucklemester Stillworm. And there, bobbing on the waves, was the king's long ship. Way up the other end of the beach were the campfires of all of those that had come to watch the battle. And there was the great long house in which the king was sat, most likely, worrying whether he would ever see another feast, or even his daughter ever again. Now, Ashipattle took that iron pot. He went off down to the beach. Oh, who goes there? Said the guard on the boat. Oh, it's just me, Ashipattle. What are you doing there? Oh, I'm just going to make some mussel soup. Would you like to join me? It's a chilly morning. Oh no, said the guard. More than my life would be worth to leave this boat. Now Ashipattle put the pot down, and he started to clear away the sand, as if he was making a little hollow in which to lay a fire. And as he did so, he said, oh! He picked it up, bit it. Oh, goodness gracious me, this is amazing. Oh, more golden coins. Somebody must have buried treasure here. That was too much for the guard. The guard jumped out of the boat, rushed down the beach, pushed Ashipattle away. Ashipattle grabbed the iron pot, ran down the beach, pushed the boat, and then jumped in. Too late for the guard to realise he'd been tricked. He roared and roared. People came rushing down the beach. The king, watching the boat go out across the water, his only chance to save his daughter. And they stood there. Ashipattle lined that boat up until it was there, right in front of the Mucklemester Stillworm's face, immediately between the eyes. And he sat and he waited. It wasn't too long before the first rays of sunlight came and and stroked the eyelids of the monster. The monster opened its eyes and opened its great jaws and sucked in the sea and everything in the sea and everything on the sea, including Ashipattle, in the boat. And down, 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 through the great jaws he went, down, 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 into the body of that monstrous creature. Down, down, down in the rush of water, until the mast struck on a rib. Now Ashipattle knew he didn't have too much time. He jumped out of that boat, and in the phosphorescent glow in that dark cavernous belly, he went looking. He paddled about until he found what he was looking for. It was large, it was smooth and slippery and red. It was the creature's liver. He took his knife and he cut a great slit in the liver. And then he took his knife and cut another. Pulled the liver apart and he tipped the glowing peat inside. Slapped the top bit on, grabbed the pot, because he had to return it to his mother, ran back to the boat, hopped in the boat and faced the opposite direction. And then he waited. Now along the shore, the people that had gathered had seen the boat disappear inside the Mucklemester's stoolway, when suddenly Gender Lovely said, "Look, the monstrous creature can now breathe smoke. It's going to burn the land." And there was smoke pouring out of its nostrils, and the sea creature writhed in agony, and suddenly it opened its jaws and went, "Burr!" And all of the sea and everything that had been in the sea and on the sea, including Ashipattle in the boat, was spewed back out of the monster in such a force that the boat was brought right up high onto the sand dunes. "Arrest that man," said the guard. "No," said the king, "look." And Mucklemester Stoolway raised his head in agony, and a great forked tongue took a slice out of the moon and came crashing down through the land. And that place today we know as the Baltic Sea. Once more he writhed in agony. His great head reached up, smashed down, and teeth fell out. And they're the Shetland Isles. Raised its head, roared in agony again, smashed its head down, and the teeth that fell out that time became the Shetland Isles, the Orkney Isles and the Faroe Isles. And one more time it roared, but rudely this time, and sank a little bit west of here. And we know that as Iceland. Well, the king rushed down the beach to that sorry, bedraggled figure that was Ashipattle. He took off his own cloak and wrapped it round Ashipattle's shoulders. He took off the great sword, Snickersnapper, and belted it around Ashipattle. And Gender Lovely herself took his hands, claiming him for her husband, for being so brave, and of course a worthy person, not just to be her husband, but a future ruler of that land. And so they were married, and they lived happy. And they had many children, and those children's children had children, and those children's children had children, and so on down through the years, until one of those great grandchildren told me the story I've just told you.
And this is Nordic voices. So we will move around, go from one language, from one person to another person, just around our part of the world. The next storyteller comes from Germany. And she's not even going to tell in German. She's going to tell in English. And she lives not far from Berlin, in Potsdam. And her name is Suse Weiss.
I brought a story from the very north of Germany. I grew up in the very north, and that's how I made it here to Nordic Voices. Okay, it's a very old story, and it's written down if you in a Low German dialect, which I will spare you. But it sounds like this. Dat is nog heel tid lang her, maar voor 2000 jaar wein, da vil den heel rik man, der har en muy fremme fru, men der har geen kennis. It's a long time ago. There was a rather rich man that had a very nice, beautiful young woman, and they loved each other by heart, but they had no children. And even though the woman was praying so much, she would never and ever get any kids. Now, in front of their house there was a big courtyard, and on that courtyard there was a tree, a juniper tree called Katalja. Is that right? Now one day in wintertime, the woman was standing right under that tree, cutting herself an apple, well, peeling herself an apple, when in one moment she cut herself in her finger, and the blood was dropping down onto the snowy ground, and she looked at that blood and that snow, and she said, sighing up high, oh, if I had a child as white as snow and as red as blood. And this is not going where you might think now it goes. But you know, the moment she had said that, it was so light in her heart. She just turned round and went into the house, and it just felt like this now might come true. And then one moon went away and the snow just melted. And in the second moon, the green was coming out of the earth, out of the ground. And in the third, there were all flowers. In the fourth, the forest was growing green and birds all singing. And in the fifth moon, it was all blossoming, and she was falling down on her knees under the juniper tree, so happy she didn't know what to do with her heart. And in the 6th month, you know, fruits were all growing bigger and bigger. Bigger and bigger and bigger. And she was feeling so well. And in the 7th moon, she was starting to eat all the fruits, and ate and ate and ate and ate. And in the 8th moon, she was becoming so ill that she thought she might die. And so she asked her husband, please, if I die, just bury me under that juniper tree. And then, in the 9th moon, she finally, at the end of it, gave birth to a child that was as white as snow and red as blood. And when she saw that, she was so overcome by joy she died.
No.
Yeah. So her husband buried her under the juniper tree as he had promised. And he wept. He wept and wept. And then sometime he wept a little less and wept and wept. And then sometime he just stopped weeping and crying. And some more time, he took another wife. And with the second wife, he had a girl. But the child from the first wife was a boy. So now, that woman, when she looked at her girl, her daughter, Marleneken, she felt it so much in her heart, how she loved that girl. But then she saw that little boy, and the evil was really given it into her heart, that it seemed that he was always standing in her way. And she was always thinking how she could manage to give all the wealth, the richdom to her girl and not to pass it on to the boy. And when he was there, he always puffed him and stuffed him away. And when he came back home from school, he was always in fear. There was no place for him to be. Now one day, she was in the upkammer, which is a chamber. In the north, we don't have any cellars. It's too wet in the ground. So we have an upkammer behind the kitchen where you have to store all the food, One day she was in that upkammer when little Marleneken came in asking, Mama, can we have an apple? Oh, yes, dear, she said, come on. And she opened that big chest. Now that chest had a very heavy wooden lid with a sharp iron lock. And she took an apple out and handed it over to Marleneken. Now Marleneken took that apple and said, shall brother have one too? Wow, that wicked the lady, but she said, well, when he comes from school. But in the same moment when she saw in the window he was all coming, the evil was just coming over her. And she grabbed away that apple from Malenkin and threw it into the chest, saying, you shall not have an apple before your brother. And shut the lid down. Now, Malenkin went out. Next moment, the little brother, the little son, standing there right in the door, and she asked him quite friendly, would you have an apple, my son? Yes, Mom, he said, give me an apple, but why do you look so greedily? Well, she said, come on, get your apple yourself out of the chest and open the lid. Now, the moment the boy bent into the chest to take his apple off, the evil was just riding her, and she smashed the heavy lid down so that his head get cut off and fell down beneath the red apples. Next moment she would think, oh, what can I do to get that off from me? And she ran up into her chamber, and out of her drawer she took a white piece of cloth, and then she took the boy and also his hat, and she heaved him outside the door onto a chair and put the head onto the neck and turned the cloth around it so nobody would see the cut. And then he gave him the red apple right in his hand. Now, some moments later, Malenkin was coming into the kitchen, finding her mother there at the oven with a big pot with water in it, stirring it. Malenkin stood there saying, hey, Mom, brother's outside the door on a chair. He has a nice red apple. I asked him to give me the apple, but he won't answer. I'm really cross. Well, go back, ask him again, and if he still won't answer, just box him at the ear. Malenkin went back asking her brother for the apple, and he didn't answer, so she gave him a box on the ear. His head came down. She shrieked, she shouted, Mommy, Mommy, I've cut my brother's head off. And she went crying into the kitchen and would not come to peace. Malenkin, her mother said, what did you do? But shh, we won't tell anybody. We will just cook him into stew. And she took the boy and she cut him into pieces and they cooked it all. And you know, Malenkin stood there very close to the pot and crying all her bloody teeth. They wouldn't need any salt. So, not very long later, just as long as it takes to get it, ready, it was lunchtime. Husband was coming home, asking for his son. Sitting there at the table waiting for lunch, he asked, where is my boy? So in came his wife with a big pot of black stew, heaving it on the table. He asked again, where is my little boy? Oh, she said, he went over the fields to see the uncle of his former mother. Oh, his father said. The father said, that's not right. Why didn't he say goodbye to me? Well, she said, I don't know, but he wanted to stay there like 6 weeks. Oh no, he said, I'm really feeling sad about that. He should have said goodbye. Malenkin, he said, then why do you cry like that? He will come back. And with this he started to eat. Gosh, woman, he said, this is very tasteful. Give me more of it. And the more he ate, the more he wanted to have. This is delicious, he said. This is as if it was all for me. You shan't have any of that. And he ate and ate and ate, and all the bones and joints he just threw under the table. So the little sister Malenkin, she went up to her chamber, and out of her drawer she got the silken cloth, and then she went to gather all the bones and joints into that silken cloth and carry it out of the door and laid it down neath the juniper tree, and she was crying all the time with bloody tears. But the moment she had laid them down there, something happened to the juniper tree. The branches were coming wide open and together again, and wide open and together again. And then there was a fire in the middle of the tree, and out of this fire flew high up into the sky a little bird singing a most beautiful tunes. When she looked back at the tree, it was as it was before, always, just normal. And the crossbones was gone. But Marlenken felt better in her heart, and she went back into the house. Now that bird flew high, 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 long, 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 till it came to a goldsmith's workshop. And there, outside on the street, that bird found a tree and started to sing. Mijn moeder deed mij slacht, mijn vader deed mij eet, mijn zuster dat Marleneken zucht alle meine Beneken und bindt ze in den Siedendauch, legt's onder de machandelboom, kiewit, och, wat een mooi vogel ben ik. Now the goldsmith heard that, and it seemed so marvelous to him, so he just ran out of the door into the plain sunshine on the street, and still he had his pins in his hand and a golden chain he was working at, looking at that bird saying, wow, that is so gorgeous how you sing that song for me again. Nee, answered, the bird answered. Nee, we say in Northern German dialect. I won't sing twice without nothing. Give me that chain and I sing it again. So the goldsmith handed over that chain and heard that song again. And then, when the bird was ready with that song, he just had the golden chain in his red claw and opened his wings and flew on. And flew, till he came to coppers, shoemakers workshop. And landing on the roof, he started to sing. Mijn moeder deed mij slacht, mijn vader deed mij eet, mijn zuster dat Marleneken zucht alle meine Beneken und bindt ze in den Siedendauch, legt's onder de machandelboom, kiewit, och, wat een mooi vogel ben ik. Now, the shoemaker didn't even wait till the end of the song. He just called for his wife and his sons and his knights and the maidens that could all come out the door and listen to that bird. And when they were there, the bird had ended. So he said, now sing that again, because now we are all together here to listen. Nay, the bird said, I won't sing twice for nothing. Give me a present and I sing again. Well, woman, he said, just go up onto the attic. There is a red pair of shoes. Please. I like to make him say please, you know. She went on. She brought the red shoes, and then the shoemaker handed them over to the bird, and the bird sang again. And when he was finished with singing, he just had in his left claw the red shoes, in his right claw the golden chain, and so he flew and far away till to a lemon tree which was standing right beside a mill. And inside that mill there were 20 miller boys hacking a stone like hick-huck, a big millstone, hick-huck. And the mill was going clip-a-clap, 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 hick-huck. And now the bird started to sing, Mijn moeder deed mij slacht. So 2 of the millers heard that and stopped hacking. Mijn vader deed mij eet. Now again 3 were stopping and just listening. Mijn zuster dat Marleneken zucht alle meine Beneken. Now it were only 8 to go on working. Bindt ze in Siedendauch, legt's onder. Now it were only 3. De machandelboom, kiewit, och. And now the last one had also stopped working and heard just the last one. Wat een mooi vogel ben ik. So he went out looking at that lemon tree saying, Bird, you're just marvelous. Please sing that again. I want to hear the whole of it. Nay, he said, I won't sing twice. Just give me that millstone you are hacking at. Well, he said, if it was only mine, you could have it. Now all the other miller boys were outside and they said, yes, he shall have it. And so he shall sing again and he shall have it. And so they were all like, ha, up. And they brought it up all together. And when they had it up like this big millstone, the tiny little bird came flying down and took it like a collar around his neck and flew back on that lemon tree. You don't believe, but it's true. You haven't seen it. It was true. And started to sing over again. And then, when he finished his song, he flew flew up high, high into the sky and back to his father's house. Now inside the house they were sitting there, father, mother and Malinken. And the father said, oh, what a marvelous day is this day. Sun is shining, I just feel gorgeous. No, his wife said, no. I feel as if there would become a thunderstorm or something. And Malinken was just crying, crying, crying. So in that moment, the bird arrived and sat down on the roof. The roof was going like this. The father said, well, but it's so much sunshine outside, and I have a grand feeling like I would see an old friend today again. Or, no, his wife said, I feel like, I don't know, so frightened. My teeth are clapping, and at the same moment, it is like fire in my veins, and I'm hot. And she ripped open her dress. But Malinken was just crying, crying. All her apron was wet for tears. And then, in this moment, the bird just flew over to the juniper tree, settled down there and started to sing. My mother did me slaughter. In this moment, the woman jumped up and she shut her eyes and she wanted to put her hands over her ears because she wouldn't like to hear, not to see anything, but there was the most stark thunderstorm in her ears and her eyes were lightning and flashing. My father did me 8. So the husband got up and said, well, what a wonderful bird is singing a song outside there. My sister called Malinken. My sister called Malinken, gathered all my bones and joints. Now Malinken dropped her head on her knees and cried her eyes off. But the father, he said, I will go out to see that bird, it's so marvelous. Oh, please stay in, I'm so afraid. But he went out, put them under the juniper tree in a silken cloth. Kivit, what a beautiful bird is me. And with that last tune, he just dropped down the golden chain, and it just a necklace, and it just fell around his neck. And he felt so, wow, thank you. He felt so grand. He went back into the house saying, look at this, that beautiful bird had given me this wonderful necklace. You see it, it's pure gold and it sings so. But the woman just fell down afraid like that. And then the bird started over again. Me mother did me slaughter. So she came up again saying, I don't want to hear this. I want to be 1,000 footer down the ground. Me father did me 8, so bam, she fell again, and the hat fell from her head, you know. My sister called Malinken. In this moment, Malinken lifted her head, and she said, I will go out and see if I get any comfort or maybe a present. And she went out into the garden, and the bird continued singing, gathered all my joints and bones, tied them up in silky cloths, laid them neath the juniper tree, give it, what a beautiful bird is me, and threw down the red shoes. Now she put them on, and they were there, they were hers, and she danced and jumped all light-hearted back into the house saying, this is a marvelous bird, gave me red shoes, and my heart is so nice now, I feel so. But with this, the woman got up, and her hairs were standing like flames all around her head. And she said, I will go out, because it feels as if there is an earthquake and end of world is coming. I will see if I can get light-hearted as well. And the moment she came out of the door, brach! He just let drop the millstone so that she was smashed. Now, Father and Malinken heard that, so they came out the door, but from that spot there was a fire, a mist, a smoke. And when that all had squatted away, there was little brother. So they took them by their hands, father, brother, girl, and in they went and ate.
2019 tähän samaan aikaan järjestetään seuraava Nordiska röster Nordic Voices festivaali ja tervetuloa silloin katsomaan ja kuulemaan lisää tarinoita. Sitä ennenkin Turussa tapahtuu, mutta näin isosti tapahtuu vuoden päästä uudestaan. Kiitos teille kaikille.